Hello, everyone. We're here with the second part of World War II class. So I will show you the presentation we got for World War II. I'll skip through the first parts because you already know them. So I will just be moving forward. We got some final numbers for the end of World War II. These are approximate numbers according to the ONU. So 60 million deaths, about 2.5% of the population were killed during this conflict. Now, this is a map of the highest acquisitions of the Third Reich and the Axis powers. So notice they reached Stalingrad, notice they invaded France, they got Norway, they got Finland, they got Denmark, they got the southern eastern part of Europe, and they were fighting the Allies who are in white. In this particular picture, you don't see the Allies doing much of an attempt, but the British resisted and the USSR resisted. Remember, the United States are also part of the Allies and parts of China. So this is the way the war would look at its most critical point. Remember that map where it's going to be referred to constantly. Now, at first, remember Chamberlain was the prime minister of the British, and he refused to take action against Hitler's moves before the war started, and that caused Hitler to get more territories than he was suited for in the eyes of the Allies. So he got Poland, he got Denmark, he got the north of Czechoslovakia, just with some treaties. He did not need to invade them. And it was a mistake. As Winston Churchill was constantly saying, they needed to put a stop to Hitler before something else happened, but nobody listened to him. So when the war broke out, when Hitler decided to finally invade Poland, the French were already preparing against the Germans, and it was too late. The Germans invaded Poland, and then they invaded France. So that's the beginning of the war. Now, remember, these two concepts are going to be used constantly throughout this presentation. One of them is Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is the German word for fast war, and it shows the tactics that Hitler used to invade quickly and efficiently some territories, most prominently Poland, France, parts of Czechoslovakia in the war. And as they will march through the USSR to try to get to Stalingrad, they're going to use Blitzkrieg tactics. Blitzkrieg is basically using a lot of German panzers, the tanks of the Nazis, and using infantry to control the territories once they are surrounded by the panzers. They are being supported by the Air Force. They are being supported by airplanes that drop bombs on the defenses of the lines of the frontiers. And once they invade, once they get that territory, they continue moving forward. They don't have to stop because it's so fast, it doesn't expend as many resources as World War I did with the trenches. So it is an efficient warfare tactic to invade quickly and efficiently. Then the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe is the name of the Air Force. This is the symbol, the eagle with the swastika. And it was a specialized Air Force trained to attack the British. They were trained to go fly across the ocean so they could reach the British cities, and they attacked London, Liverpool, and many cities, as we will see later on. The Luftwaffe became a terrific force for everybody. They attacked at night and they killed at least 40,000 civilians. So we will remember these two concepts. They are German concepts, so there shouldn't be any confusion with it. Japan was attacking the Pacific. Japan had a loose connection to the Nazi empire, to the Third Reich, and they had somewhat of chats with Mussolini in Italy. The Japanese thought that while Europe was fighting their world war, their conflict, the USSR would not interrupt their intentions to invade the Pacific. The only other country that could intercept their plans to expand were the United States. And that's why they will attack eventually the United States in the Pearl Harbor attack. But before that, the USA were neutral, so they had complete free reign over what territories to invade. And they invaded most of the islands that they needed to expand. They had a lot of people, they had a lot of economical crisis, so they justified their invasions as something they needed to do, okay? They mostly conquered the entire Pacific Islands before the United States intervened. Now, when we talk about the beginning of the war, we need to talk about certain countries that were invaded quickly. The first one was Poland. Poland was divided between the Germans and the USSR because Hitler had promised to Stalin that if they did not interrupt their plans to to expand, he would give half of Poland to the USSR, the eastern part. So Stalin said, yeah, okay, go ahead. And they did not defend Poland once Germany got there. Once Germany got to Poland and they invaded quickly over 3 weeks, they made the effort to conquer the cities as fast as possible so that the French would not be able to come as a preemptive strike. As Hitler had predicted correctly, the French and the British would take time to amass their forces, and that time they took to prepare would be enough for Hitler to invade Poland and to return to Germany. Not only that, he also had time to prepare to invade Denmark and Norway to the north, and he did without much interference from anybody. So he was left to his own devices, and he did it quickly and efficiently. That's a problem with the war, because by the time France manages to create certain defenses to stop the German advances, Germany had already invaded Belgium to the north of France and the Netherlands to the north of France too, so that they could enter unprotected to French territory. They surrendered after 3 weeks because they realized they could not stand against the Germans. By this time, Winston Churchill, who was the advocate against Hitler, nobody listened to him in the past, they appointed him the chancellor and the prime minister so that he could take military action against Hitler. This military action was guided by the idea of no surrender. We should completely eradicate Hitler's forces. We should completely stop the Axis from gaining any more territories. So Churchill became the spokesperson for the anti-Nazi sentiment. But in all of this time, the USA have not intervened. They have always been sympathetic to the Allies, but they only sent weapons, they only sent ships, they only sent basic resources, but they don't interfere. They don't take sides. They're neutral, just like Spain was, Portugal was. So they have no interest really in fighting directly in a war that's so recent from World War I. They still have these scars and these ideas of trying to achieve peace, because World War I was devastating. So once Winston Churchill became the Prime Minister of England, he makes the entire system of the British economy directed towards the war efforts. And that's going to prove efficient, because that's when they create the Royal Air Force as a specialized army that fights in air against the Luftwaffe. The USA always favors the Allies. That means the USA always said that they would be sympathetic towards the causes of the French and the British. Later on, for the USSR, they have extremely dissimilar ideas. They're not regarded as comrades, such as the other countries are, because all of them are totalitarian states. These ones have different governments, these ones have different suspicions, but they had to quell them for a minute in order to focus on the enemy at hand, which was Hitler and the Nazi Third Reich. So the USA had always had this preference for the Allies. Once Japan decides to attack Pearl Harbor with the intention of preemptively eradicating the USA intervention in the Pacific, the USA have the perfect reason to enter war. Japan only wanted the United States to not intervene in their expansion towards the Pacific. So the attack on Pearl Harbor was a preemptive strike. The war crime that it represents is because there was no warning. It just happened in the morning of December 7th, and Roosevelt famously said it was a day which will live in infamy, because they did not warn anyone they would attack Pearl Harbor, which was full of civilians and officers, an army, but they were not prepared, which was deemed as bad sportsmanship, if you want to. This set off a chain reaction in which the United States said, okay, Japan attacked us, we need to declare war against Japan, because this cannot go unpunished. When the United States declares war to Japan, Germany, who has a loose alliance to Japan, says, hey, you cannot enter war against Japan, we will declare war to you, and also does Italy. So the United States says, well, if you want to go to war, then we go to war. So they go to war against Germany and the Axis powers too. That chain reaction was started because of Pearl Harbor attack. That was a joint attack, not only on Pearl Harbor, but on USA-controlled countries like the Philippines and Guam. This image here is of a kamikaze. Kamikazes were used during the Pearl Harbor attack. Kamikaze is the term we use for a soldier that sacrifices his or her life in order to create an explosion and to kill more people. And this here is the link of a map of how it was divided the territories. Blue are the USA countries, red are the Japanese countries. You can see Pearl Harbor here, you can see the Line Islands here. WWII Islands, the Philippines, and in here Midway will be the turning point in the war because they will fight the United States in a decisive battle. So this map is going to be interesting in a while, okay? So thank you all. I'll see you in a minute. Ask questions in the chat.